During our first summer at Lake Bonaparte without my grandfather, one day when my parents had gone to Natural Bone and left my sister Delight in charge of the island, Brother Herb and I went off and got lost in the Rhinoceros Hills. The deep, dark Rhinoceros Hills, they march at night, the Rhinoceros Hills. Those spooky, creepy Rhinoceros Hills, they move at night when the whippoorwill trills. Delight, who loved to tickle and to frighten us, recited this to us evenings when we were out on the camp porch and could see the sun setting behind those moss-backed hills at the unsettled end of the lake. All along that shore were yellow signs reading, "Danger, Duds, Impact Area, Do Not Enter." Naturally, we kids were not supposed to go back into the reservation by ourselves, but the dead, wasted center of the artillery target area was quite a ways back in that wilderness, and with our parents we made regular pilgrimages to various places back on the reservation a little way, such as to the ghost town Alpine, where we collected jewel-like slag chunks from around the old pyramidal smelter. Also on the edge of the military reservation was Burnt Pond, where we went for blueberries, and Burger Pond, to which my grandfather and Ernie Thomas had carried a milk can full of trout for stocking, though on several attempts to return and check on the progress of the trout, they had not even been able to find the pond. And there was the mica mine behind Hidden Pond, where we often went to pick up mica chunks for rock collections, gardens, bookends, and doorstops. It was notoriously easy to get lost among those bogs and rocks. It happened to my grandfather many times, as it has to me. But I have never been quite so lost as on the hike with Herb and our old dog Binker. On that summer day, Herb and I had looked on an old postcard, still for sale at Priest's store, though drawn 30 years earlier by Earl Priest himself. It was a map of Lake Bonaparte, showing near the shore of Hidden Pond not one, but 2 mica mines. We thought it would make a fine story to bring home if we could find the lost mine. Maybe it was Herb's idea, because he was about the age where he would have to be writing essays in the fall on what he did during his summer vacation, and I, 4 years younger, was easily led. Binker was the same age as I, which is old for a dog, and this would be the trip just about end all her trips. Herb and I decided that we would make an expedition to Hidden Pond, where we would leave a set line for bullheads, and then go off looking for the mine. There would be no need to announce that we were going to look for the mine. Granddad had told us some years before that when he was a young man, he had sometimes caught bullheads, which are a big-mouthed, omnivorous, slow and persistent fish, by stringing a lot of worms onto a line, wrapping them into a ball, and throwing the ball on a line out to lie on the bottom of a pond. Later, he would just pull the ball of worms in, and as many as half a dozen bullheads would be attached to it, and they wouldn't let go until he pulled them out of the water and shook them into a bucket. So we made a disgusting worm ball and went off across the lake with Binker at the bow of the fishing boat to the landing place for Hidden Pond in a bay behind Round Island. At Hidden Pond, we hooked the worm ball on the end of a line, cast it out into the pond, and then tied the line to a bush so that the casting rod wouldn't get dragged into the pond while we were off looking for the lost mine. And it didn't have to get dark, and the Rhinoceros Hills didn't have to move for us to get quickly lost in them. Up to the shoulders in the bog, swamp and beaver swale, all much pretty the same, but slightly different directions, the hills led us into themselves. The sky was completely overcast that day, and we couldn't even tell approximately where the sun was. There'd been a breeze on the lake, but back in the hills the air was still. Black flies, horse flies, deer flies, and mosquitoes all were moving close to the ground and diving crazily into our hair as if disoriented and maddened by the heavy atmosphere. Moss grew everywhere, not just on the north sides of the trees, and the artillery was not firing that day, so we couldn't tell when we were getting more and more lost. Each ridge we mounted had a wide road of bare granite down its back, which we followed until it narrowed into a game trail, and the trail dove into impenetrable brush and bog. At the top of one ridge we climbed a pine tree, but from the top of the tree we saw only another ridge and another tree. We tried pushing the dog ahead of us, hoping she would lead us home by smell, but she just sat down with her tongue lolling and waiting for us to go ahead. So Herb led blindly on, I following faithfully, and Binker doggedly. After hours of wandering, we came out into a big beaver meadow with luxuriant foxtail grass up to my waist, huge ostrich ferns around clumps of alders, here and there a standing dead tree or a pocket of water into which a dozen frogs jumped when we brushed by. And then, as if exploded from the earth, a deer sprang up near an alder clump just ahead of us. As it bounded out of sight, we went to see where it had come from, and there was its oval of matted grass under an ostrich fern. And there, within 6 feet of the deer's bed, was a giant silver bullet, 18 or 20 inches long. It was, of course, an artillery dud. It must have hit somewhere first and bounced to the spot where we found it, only partly buried in the mud. We knew about duds. We even knew stories of hunters who had lost their legs when they tried to bring duds home as souvenirs, but neither of us had ever seen one, and this object seemed so fantastic, so like something that might have fallen to earth from some other future, larger world, that we forgot what we knew, got down on our knees and dug it out of the mud. Though we were absolutely lost and quite fatigued, the excitement of our find made us feel that our trip had achieved its goal, so we marched off with our prize, confident that we were heading home. After a while, Herb let me carry the silver bullet. As we walked, I whispered in my head, "In the deep, dark Rhinoceros Hills, they march at night in the Rhinoceros Hills." We came out onto a bluff over a round pond, facing 2 other bluffs on other shores of the pond. We didn't know of any such 3-bluffed pond, and none shows on any map I've seen. We walked away from this unknown pond, and in 20 minutes we came out to a different granite bluff, though apparently over the same pond. But maybe it was a different pond, or as Herb suggested, the same pond, moved underground to a different spot. As we walked off again, he made up this verse: "Unknown pond in the Rhinoceros Hills, moves underground, it flows under hills." We were in marvelous good spirits, considering we were still getting loster. After another hour's march, we came to the shore of a full-sized lake which we had never seen before. The water was red from hemlock tea, and since there were no other lakes so large in the reservation wilderness, we knew that this was Indian Lake. We were miles from Hidden Pond, and we didn't know how we'd gotten there. But we at last knew where we were, and this increased our confidence that we were now headed home. Carrying the great silver bullet, we never slipped and fell. We hadn't hiked long again before we came out on a bluff over a long pond, which we both recognized as Burnt Pond, and from there we were sure of the way back to the lake. It took us only another 45 minutes to reach Bonaparte's shore, and there we put the big bullet on a cushion in the bottom of the boat and waded right into the water with Binker to drink and cool off, forgetting about the set line in Hidden Pond. We were just coming out from behind Round Island and heading across the lake when we saw our family runabout come out from behind Loon Island. Slowing as we met off the second shoal near the middle of the lake, Delight was alone in the other boat. We slowed down too and came up beside her. She and Herb cut the motors and grabbed the gunwales of each other's boats. "Didn't you guys hear the bell ringing?" she said. "Mom and Dad are back and dinner's been waiting." "We were lost," I said proudly. And then Delight saw the silver bullet. "Where did you guys get that?" she demanded. "Back there," said Herb, pointing over Round Island to the bluffs, and already realizing something was wrong. "It's a giant silver bullet," I said. "You stupid dummies. That's a danger dud, don't you know? Danger duds, impact area, do not enter. What do you think? It could go off and kill you. We've got to get rid of it." Delight woke us from our dream of other worlds in which we had forgotten the danger in this one. Or partly woke us. There was no way we were going to take this bombshell back to where we got it, so it seemed the obvious thing to put it overboard here in the middle of the lake, as if it were a fish he didn't want to injure or to keep. Herb eased it overboard and then released it. But it didn't swim off slantwise like a fish. It tilted and dove straight for the bottom. From deep in its stomach, the lake rumbled. After a few more seconds, the water bellied up under our two boats. Thousands of bubbles burst to the surface, and then dozens of stunned rock bass spiraled up. The three of us kids, stunned also, held onto each other's gunwales for another minute. Delight looked back to Loon Island. "Maybe we'd better not worry Mother and Dad by saying anything about this," she said. Back at the island, we were surprised to learn that it was 7 o'clock, because we thought it was only mid-afternoon, which was about the time we had gotten lost. We told our parents we had gone fishing in Hidden Pond and had decided to look for the lost mine while the set line was out. We told how we had found Indian Lake, Unknown Pond, and then how we discovered ourselves at Burnt Pond. But temporarily, we forgot about the great silver bullet. "Great day in the morning," said my father. And then we remembered that we had forgotten to pick up the worm ball set at the set line at Hidden Pond. "You can go back and get it tomorrow," said my father. "Tomorrow's another day." We slept dreamlessly that night, and Binker slept for most of the rest of her days. Herb and I went back to Hidden Pond the day after being lost, and we found a bush shaking on the shore. At the other end of our set line was a huge moss-backed turtle, like a water rhinoceros. We pulled him close to the bank, where he thrashed, clawed bottom, and broke the line. Several days later, I was walking along the drift-cluttered beach where I had found my grandfather's pipe the season before. This time I found a lot of rock bass like fall leaves at the edge of the water, and beached among them the largest wall-eyed pike I had ever seen, or at least 2/3 of it, for turtles had eaten away most of the tail section. This may or may not have been the great walleye which my grandfather had lost once, but now I felt that I had helped us lose it forever. So I left it there, and I didn't tell anyone about it. The next day I watched a flock of seagulls clean the bones and bear them away.